welcome everybody. This is Pat O'Meara, Chairman and CEO of Inveniam Capital Partners, and we're excited about today's podcast. I'm joined by my colleagues here, Albert Berdellins, Kevin Cutterback, and Rick Bunker, and together we're hosting Fiacc, who is with G42. He runs their crypto and blockchain business. And we're going to learn a little bit more about him. But why don't we real quick run through kind of the normal hosts so that you know who we are. Kevin, quickly introduce yourself, brother.
Kevin Cutterback, Chief Data Scientist. My role on most of these is more like sales engineer. What is the tech that's out there, and how does it solve customer problems?
Fantastic. Rick, please introduce yourself.
I'm CTO of Inveniam. My team builds the software and designs the software that we use at Inveniam, and I've had a reasonably long career in financial markets IT.
Fantastic. Thank you, buddy. Albert?
My name's Albert Berdellins. I lead the AI division at Inveniam. I spend the first half of most of my day talking people out of using AI for things that don't make sense. And then I spend the second half of my day talking them into using AI for things that do make sense.
That's kind of like Rick's blockchain day, really. I mean, that's the same thing we do over there, talking people out of blockchain that doesn't make sense and into blockchain that does.
That's awesome. Thank you. Fiacc, again, welcome. It's great to have you on. Why don't you give a quick introduction of yourself, and then let's go into a little bit about G42.
Great to be here. Thanks, Pat. My name is Fiacc Larkin. I'm head of crypto and blockchain for G42. I have a background in an academic background in AI. So I did a PhD in a sub area of AI. Professionally, I've always been involved with traditional markets, systematic trading. I was on a high frequency trading desk for a while. Did a lot around risk management and building up systematic trading teams, strategies, so on and so forth. More recently, I've become professionally involved in crypto and blockchain. I've always been interested in crypto and blockchain because for a nerd like me, it's the culmination of everything that is wonderful about markets and technology. So that's me in a nutshell. G42 is a very interesting organization. If you're in the Middle East or anywhere abouts, you'll know G42. We're pretty much a household name, and if you're outside, you won't have an absolute clue who we are. So it's a very large technology firm based here in Abu Dhabi, about 20,000 employees. I wouldn't even hesitate to guess the valuation at this stage. But we have about 10 different business units which span vast different areas such as cloud computing, AI, healthcare, geospatial analytics. What else is there? There's a number of other business units. I'm leading, as I said, the crypto and AI section, and I'm delighted to be here.
Fiacc, thanks so much. And one of the things that we're going to really tackle the question of AI, and I love Albert's comment about half the day saying don't use AI, half the day use AI, and we are a believer in that AI is going to be transformative to capital markets, and where we're focused. That where Kevin will talk a little bit more about later is in the private market side, where there's enormous opportunity because of data asymmetry, lack of quality data, et cetera. And when we think about AI and large language models being utilized and becoming, as to quote you a little bit ago, part of the fabric of the markets, particularly as we think about private markets, how important is data, right? And then maybe let's even talk about what does that mean with blockchain. But let's just tee up how important is the quality of the data for AI to live up to its hype.
I think it's absolutely essential. It's really the lifeblood of obviously any AI model, because that's really all it has. That's the only way it sees the world. AI models don't have eyes and ears. All they have is data feeds. And so, you have the item GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So if you can't trust that data, you absolutely cannot trust what's coming out of that model, no matter how sophisticated that model is. So it's absolutely essential. But we have that with even traditional models as well. Financial pricing models, asset pricing models, all of these kind of things. Every quant will tell you your model is only ever as good as the data you have. And we're in an industry where it's critical you get that right, because you're putting your money where your mouth is. You're putting your money where the model's mouth is. So it's really the difference between winning and losing.
And I'm going to maybe even nuance what you said, where you talked about the data that you have versus the data that you use, because one of the big differentiators for Inveniam is the ability to utilize data where people can become their own oracle for their data, and an entity can reach across an ecosystem or a community and pull data from many different sources in a trustless environment, where using Inveniam, there are the mechanisms to begin to trust the data, right? So just like Bitcoin in a trustless environment, you could trade value. When you have more variables than just decimalization, but you actually need to understand the underlying asset, how do you trust data that you're pulling from many different sources? And Inveniam is solving that. And AI, I want to talk a little bit about AI, the value of AI, where it goes, it gets data, you know what I mean, from many different sources, right? So it's not all in one database. And also how we feed these models, and what will these models impact, right? What will be the effect of AI? And if we can talk about not only AI as processing, but AI meaning going and getting, where, retrieving data from multiple different locations. How does that, what will blockchain do to support that? And what is the transition of AI into the markets when it pulls data from many different places and it needs to begin to trust it?
Yeah, so I think this is a huge area. If you think of any financial institute, you think, if you picture the iceberg in your mind, and what's below the waterline, it's always the back and the middle office, right? These are hugely laborious enterprises, and it feels like they've kind of been ripe for disruption for a few decades now, but nobody's been really had the gumption really to do that kind of disruption. And I think now we're on the cusp of that happening. I think about, when we had the global financial crisis, you had this huge overreaction from regulators, which put this very burdensome challenge upon financial institutions, which nobody could go against. And that created a huge amount of friction, and costs for the markets that we're all kind of absorbing. I think only now with AI are we in a position where we can start to push back against that. So talking about how AI is going to help us with those sources of data, AI in a way can, and especially the new generation of LLMs that we have, it can act sort of as the glue that we have between various data sources. So if you think about, any kind of organization, you always have a mess of multiple different databases with lots of different schemas. They're never designed perfectly. One will call something one title, the other will call it something else, even though they actually describe the same thing. And really, every financial institution tends to have this army of people who serve as that glue that have to kind of try and sew these things together, usually through some mess of Excel spreadsheets and everything else. Finally, we have a technology that can kind of apply a little bit of common sense and can kind of say, oh, right, well, I see what it's talking about here is the same thing as what it's talking about here. So it can glue together many of these different data sources, and push them into your processes that you need to do to run your businesses. Now that's fantastic, but of course you need a huge amount of checks and balances on that, because of course, like any other technology, the AI won't always get it right. So what are the checks and balances that we're going to have on those? That's going to be blockchain. So every time you have the AI make some kind of a decision, that decision can be recorded along with all the information it had access to on the blockchain. And so if you need to go back and attribute accountability, decide why it did that, you can go back to the blockchain. It's immutable, so nobody can mess with it. It's highly robust. It's because it wasn't just implemented within your organization. It's global in scale. So even if your organization is removed from the face of the earth, those records are still there. So really, these two technologies can come together in a very, very powerful way to disrupt, traditional finance. I think. I hope that's very long-winded. I hope it answered your question, Pat.
It was a fantastic answer, Rick. I'm going to throw it to you from there. Right, you ran trading systems at State Street and data systems. You went on to SEI, where you were CTO there. And you've had a career in financial services.
Yes.
In this. When you have perfected database in an Edgar database, it's easy, right? It's not easy, but it's easier, right? But what is this going to do? And let me just let you respond to Fiacc.
So I agree with every word that you said, Fiacc. There are parallel structures that have existed for a long time, really to defend against like shareholder lawsuits or insider trading investigations, where when a trading decision is made for a regulated fund, let's say for a retirement fund, you have to be able to explain to an auditor from the Department of Labor, for example, why and how you made that decision, or to someone from the SEC showing that it wasn't based on some insider tip. But no, I made this because I looked at this fundamental information from Edgar. I got this feed of investor sentiment from all the different analysts, right? I got this number from BARA, which is an expected future volatility. I did this calculation for my own expected alpha, my expected future return, based upon how we analyze the open order book or whatever it was. And then I made this trading decision. And that's been there for a while, but we didn't have a way to put that into a database that we could prove was immutable. Right now, we could put, without putting the secrets out there, we could put zero knowledge proofs of those decisions and the sources of information onto blockchain, so that in the future we can demonstrate how the decision was made. And it becomes all the more important when we're using AI to do that, because the AI inside that neural network, inside the large language model, is a little bit of a black box and creepy. And so knowing that these were the inputs, these are the outputs, connecting those together, having provenance for the information. You talked about garbage in, garbage out. Well, we've seen the large language models are not just capable, but likely to make stuff up out of whole cloth, or to at least over summarize things and make mistakes. So being able to force a quotation to an original document and be able to prove that out, because the AI's answer says, this is the expected income from this shopping mall next year. That's predicated on these leases and pointers to the actual PDFs of the lease with the signature, predicated on this report from the appraisers, predicated on this rent roll describing the terms and the rent. You see what I mean? Then we can trust that answer. We can trust it, and we can survive an audit of it.
And I think, Rick, there's two things that I want to add to that answer that you just gave, or that those comments that you just gave, which are, number one, what you talked about was providing the documentation for why there was a human decision made. When there is opaque data, we are doing the same thing for the process of the proof of process of data, going through multiple computational tools that you don't have to trust a brand, but that you can audit it and get to the source documentation. Absolutely. So that you can understand that you're doing it. So one is about decisioning, and one is about provenancing through multiple complex computations. So you get to the, the gross asset value of the asset, then you do the carry calculation and the attribution of expense, and then literally you can value the capital stack. And as you see this valuation of the capital stack of an illiquid asset, that suddenly you can begin to process that. You don't have to trust a brand, but the audit trail, the proof of process of data of originally what's out there, and literally for price discovery of real estate, infrastructure, private credit, private equity, which is going to be transformative for these secondary markets. So I want to say that processing of data, in addition to decisioning, incredibly important, and AI is going to play the role there. Oh, as Fiacc said, in the fund admin role. And I want to get here, Fiacc, to, you said fund admin has been ripe for disruption for decades, right? And I would say the last big disruptor was SS&C, who is a technology company who, with beautiful 1990s technology and 2000 technology, did disrupt, right, in a major way, and became a $50 billion company, and is a major fund admin today on the back of state-of-the-art 1990s technology, right? And there hasn't been another iteration where you turn the crank, where SS&C recreates itself, or some other fund admin like Apex, one of our investors, fully embracing technology and achieving market share based upon a technological edge, which SS&C did. And this AI implementation is going to do that. And Albert, I would throw that to you. Talk to us a little bit about that. And kind of, I want to tee up, how big is AI in that fund admin role? How big is AI on the retrieval of data in transforming it?
I think that the real key for AI adoption is, sorry, I'm in an airport. I think the real key on AI adoption is incrementality. So I think that, similar to the way that, we're not just going to wake up one day and have self-driving cars. First, we're going to have kind of automation assisted driving, and then we'll have remote driving, where maybe it's driven automatically till you get off the highway, and then it's driven remotely by a person or whatever. I think we have the same thing going on in the financial sector. So we have AI assisted functionality, first in the back office, middle office, in analysis, in data gathering, because I see this a lot in back office and finance. You reach a point where you can't really figure out how to manipulate the Excel anymore. So I see people retyping data with their fingers because they just lose track of it. And that, I see AI agents who can interact with multiple systems. Fiacc raised the point earlier that LLMs can't see. That is true, but an AI agent can orchestrate and call an OCR model and get the objects that have been broken down so it can see, or call a module to see, or use an eye when it needs to. So I think that's really going to be what we see is this incremental step of first AI assisted financial admin or fund admins, and then eventually AI gets more and more involved as you can trust it.
Absolutely. Fiacc, let me throw that back to you, right? You and I have had a number of conversations about use cases that are, kind of optimistic at best, and Pollyannish to fever dreams at worst. Do you know what I mean? About what AI is going to be doing, predictive, etc. But the use case of an AI agent for a fund going and getting another AI agent to pull data from multiple locations that are unstructured, and they use an AI agent to take unstructured data, make it structured, deliver it back, or they use a tool that delivers it back. And I was talking to one of the heads of strategy of a top 5 U.S. bank at a conference in San Francisco 2 days ago, and they were making a comment about every fund is going to have its own unique AI agent, right? And we were riffing off of that, which was fantastic. Talk about, what are the right use cases of AI adding value, and in particular, maybe if you want to highlight fund admin to add on Albert, or take it in a different direction if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is going to disrupt this industry, like every industry, really. But there's obviously a huge amount of hype here. So I think it's fantastic for the use cases that we're talking about, like being the glue between data sources, this kind of thing. Pretty much take any of the pain points that you get in these organizations, and I think you can apply it in some creative way to do that. Where I'm far less bullish is, the kind of hype where you're just going to drop an LLM in and this thing is going to make all the decisions, all the actual trading decisions, and it's just going to churn out money. Least we not forget, LLM stands for large language model. It is not designed to be fed raw numerical data, and actually it is embarrassingly poor at doing numerical calculations. If you want to laugh, you just ask ChatGPT to do like a long division, and you'll see how badly it fails. So you don't just take an LLM, plug in live market data feeds, and expect that it's going to make these prescient market predictions. I think that's very naive. But having said that, it's like what we say, that with every new technology, we always overestimate its importance in the short term and underestimate its importance in the long term. So I do think it's going to massively disrupt everything around trading, investment, certainly, risk management, reg reporting, compliance, all of these things I think is huge. I think things like risk management, if you imagine people that are responsible for making sure models are fit for purpose and coming up with various tests or whatever, I imagine it is like some kind of a clinician looking at X-rays or mammographies or something like that for cancer diagnoses. And we always find in some of these studies where we apply AI that a combination of both the radiographer, the clinician, and AI does better than either one alone, at spotting some kind of malignancy or something like that. And I can see the same thing happening with risk management, where you have this system that's constantly looking over your shoulder, that's looking at the books and the processes and the models and the code, and is pointing out things that you may have missed on a first pass. I think that's a really cool and important use case. And I think, very soon we might get to the point where regulators are going to start to mandate these kind of things, which I think is great. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, buddy. Finish that thought. I thought you were done.
No, I mean, I'm just riffing off that. I think there's so many areas here where it's kind of exciting. And another one I find interesting is if you kind of flip this on its head and you think the use cases for the regulators themselves. So, reg reporting and things like that, again, it's so onerous, and it's, and if we're honest with ourselves, it's probably not as effective as we would hope it would be. A lot of people, anyone you talk to that does this day in, day out, they're saying, I do this because I have to do this because the regulator mandate, and if you say, do you think this is really going to catch anything? They'll say no, and so anything that can clean that up and make it into just like a free output of the systems that you use, that would be very welcome. But then what I think you're going to have, so I think that's inevitable. You're going to have that because these financial institutions are going to realize the cost savings they can make when they start using LLMs for things like creating reg reports and stuff like that. But now you have an issue where regulators are going to say, okay, that's fine and that's great because I think it's great at these things. But there's a certain few things where I really do not ever want this to be AI, like a certain decision to be made by AI. And that's because I want someone, like I want a throat to choke if something goes wrong, right? So you like have a head of compliance who signs documents, and they are, they are culpable. If something goes wrong, these people can go to jail. And that's by design, and I think the regulators are going to have to get creative about finding ways of saying, okay, look, you're allowed to do X, Y, and Z using LLMs. That's all fine. But these two things, these two decision points, I always want a human to be in the loop. And now they have a challenge, because how can they prove that, that this was truly a human or this was an AI? And that's another area where blockchain comes into it, right? So again, you're back to proving, okay, this, you have some kind of proof of humanity on a blockchain. It's almost like an unforgeable digital signature by a human, and it's saying, right, this was definitely done by a human, and it can't be altered. And I think the regulators, I've actually had discussions with some regulators about this idea.
Go ahead, Rick.
I just want to say, Fiacc, I love everything you're saying, and wish that I could spend hours and hours over dinner talking to you about these things. But you talk about places where the human has to make the decision. That's very true. At the same time, I urge everybody to read this book, because it's a worldview changing masterpiece. There's a book called Noise by Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And he talks about the flaws in human decision making, and even important decisions about letting people out of jail or making insurance payments and things like that. And so, in fact, I think a combination of the AI, in some cases just simpler algorithmic suggestions, and a human to make the final decision, is called for. And something Kevin says all the time, which I'll let him expand upon, but that I found also, I use it to help debug software, right? I'm a computer geek, so I'm using these large language models, and they're pretty bad at finding any sort of subtle problem and telling me exactly how to fix it. But they're pretty good about isolating it into a particular function. And that's already a lot, right? When I've got, 10,000 lines of code and it can point me at just these 50 and say the problem's in there, that's enormously helpful. And Kevin, I'll shut up and let you talk about it. But when you talk about the risk management, I think it's more likely to say, this smells funny than this is the problem.
Yeah. I mean,
Kevin, I want to tee this up real quick, because I want to draw this distinction, because we keep talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and I want to, and real intelligence, right? There is AI, which is artificial intelligence, and then real intelligence. And that artificial intelligence, as you talked about with radiology, and Rick, as you talked about with debugging, is literally inform real intelligence to operate it optimally. You know what I mean? And Kevin, go ahead and jump in, brother.
I mean, all the time. I mean, actually, my other favorite example of intelligence is my dog barking, which is like the dog has detected that there is something unusual that might be worthy of my attention. And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. But in terms of just isolating, of the 24 hours of day, the 5 minutes where I need to pay attention, or to direct my efforts, my dog is pretty good at calling them out. In the same way, that AI is really good at saying, this looks unusual. The problem is usually here. It may not be here this time, but this looks different. That same, that AI is already there. The other thing though is like when my dog has something in its mouth, the question is, where did you get that? Right. So kind of those two, why are you barking? You're telling me that something is out of range here. But the other question is, where did you get that?
Yeah. And Fiacc, I think that what level of output do we expect from AI, right? Why are you barking, right? As my dog in the background, sorry about that. And then number two, that where did you get that, right? Two fabulous examples on how we're going to derive value from AI in markets?
Yeah. First of all, Kevin, I think you're on to a winner there. We'll put dog toys on the blockchain. I think every dog owner will. And also, how do we reduce false positives when your dog barks at the postman? I think, if you forgive my language, the world is walking into a bit of a shitstorm of consequences when it comes to LLMs. So everybody kind of agrees that we've got this groundbreaking technology and it's going to change society, and everyone's in a rush. Every company, every government, every institution is rushing as fast as they can to embed this into their processes. And I think so they're all kind of, right now, there's this panic and this rush on getting compute, trying to source the hardware, all of these kind of things. And I think there's probably less attention being paid to the downstream consequences, like the second, third, fourth order consequences of what's going to happen there. And like, of course, like any technology, things are going to go wrong, right? You imagine the kind of improvements we had in aviation over the last 100 years. We have plane crashes and stuff like that, and we've had like this slow, steady improvement and evolution of safety standards to the point where air travel is now the safest form of travel by a long shot. And the reason we have that is because we have these incredible checks and balances. We have literally this uniform system, a black box that sits in every plane. And when something does go wrong, we can come and scrutinize every detail of what happened and make the whole industry, the whole form of travel, safer for everyone else. Well, I think we really need that for AI, and I think blockchain provides or allows us to have that blockchain, that black box for AIs. So if you imagine that any decision that's made with an LLM, you take a cryptographic sum of everything that's gone into that. So you basically say, this is the model that was used. This is the exact version of the model that was used. Here's the exact data set that was used. Here was the prompt that it was fed on. And here was the human that was initiated that prompt. All of that is put together. It's in a compressed form. It's immutable, and it's time-stamped as well. Sorry, Kevin, do you want to?
Well, I just like, we do ourselves a disservice to call the airplane thing a black box, because the amazing thing is it's two functions. The voice data recorder answers the question, what were the humans doing? And the flight data recorder answers the question, what were the machines doing? And those are the two questions that, so
let's use the F-16 crash that happened last week in Singapore, right? They went through, there was a crash, everybody was trying to do it, and within hours, they had determined the particular piece of information that the gyroscope had started forwarding into another machine, into another computational tool inside the aircraft that overrode the pilot's actions and drove it into the ground. That level of specificity makes planes safer, not for that previous one, but for the next one. Do you know what I mean? And that constant voice recorder, right? What was the human doing? What was the machine doing, etc. And AI, if we don't have that recorder of what are the machines doing, where are they getting the data, it particularly as we think that it's going to be processing data at scale. And I want to get into another part of this conversation, and Albert, I'm going to go to you in a minute. But I really want to say, do we think AI is going to impact the most, right? Are those going to be public markets, or are those going to be private markets? Anybody who's watched more than 5 minutes of any of our podcasts know what answer I'm fishing for. But Kevin, why don't I tee it up for you?
Oh, I missed it because I was typing in the chat, cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder.
Oh, what markets is AI going to impact the most? Public markets, private markets, etc.
Right. I mean, like, there's this great question, even today, how much inefficiency is left in the public markets to be arbitraged? and is there any data that's going unreported or untraded on? Or are the hedge funds actually making their money on manipulation and not by removing inefficiencies? But when we look at private markets, are years behind and way behind in the quality of their tradable data. So any small opening of that tap on private markets, to me, is where the bigger opportunity is for AI to be applied almost anywhere for freeing up and revealing tradable data. Sorry, I was supposed to ask that as a question, but you got my answer.
Yeah. The private markets are going to be transformative. Albert, did you want to jump in on this real quick?
Yes, and by coincidence, I think I'm right on topic with where you're going. So I want to bring the topic for discussion back to the matter at hand about tradable data, and I want to talk about environments and dimensionality. So one, I think, implicit aspect that we're talking about with a trade is that there has to be at least two parties involved. And we see a lot of speed of adoption for AI, and everyone wants to, get AI up and running for themselves in whatever capacity. But no one's really thinking about what happens when the other side, when your counterparty has an AI too, or when there's two or more, 3 or 4 AIs involved. What kind of environment are they going to interact in? How are they going to transact amongst each other on your behalf?
And
that
trade
is a major
data on
problem.
them. Yeah, and trade data.
Well, exactly. So what I think is interesting is, talking about public versus private markets, and I'd love to get Fiacc's opinion on dimensionality. But in the public market, all your data is out there. You put it out for everyone. Everyone can see it. And if there's a weakness, you assume that the market will pounce on it. But in a private transaction, there's nearly infinite possible variations of how your trade could possibly go. One of the very early applications for AI in a competitive context was chess, and it worked because there's a finite number of moves that can be made. And of course, it grows and grows and grows. And so it starts to break down as it gets complex. But there's a lot more options in a private market transaction than there are on a chessboard. And so having the control over the specific vectors and mechanisms by which the AI interacts with that transaction is a lot more important to keep under control than it would be in another context. So I would love to hear Fiacc's opinion on dimensionality and where AI could be most useful or least useful.
Yeah, I think what's so exciting about the private markets and everything we're talking about here is we're really kind of democratizing all of this, right? We're allowing more players in. We're allowing us to source and bring liquidity to areas where it was previously more difficult. And we're kind of removing some of the traditional gatekeepers that might have stood over and had a monopoly over these kind of deals, So you're letting in more average players in here, but you have to protect them in some way. If they don't have teams to be able to do their due diligence and everything else, how do they verify that this information? And I think that's where blockchain and tools like Inveniam can really help us, because you're saying, okay, look, here's all the data. It comes from a myriad of different dimensions, but I can show you verifiably like where the sources are. You can trace it right back there. That's not to say that ultimately it's not a true source, but if you're seeing it in so many different places, then it's corroborating each other, and you can do all your homework and everything like that. So I think it kind of evens the playing fields there and allows smaller players to be able to get into this game.
Yeah, you don't need enterprise-wide adoption, and I think this is one of the big things of AI, and this is one of the big things that Inveniam wants to deliver, is the ability to deliver the value of AI and verified data so that your asset is always ready for sale and it's ready to push that out and interact with counterparties in the old world TradFi and the new world DeFi and in these new exchanges that are being created, right? And it's an expanding world where we're trying to facilitate the ability to trust this data, right? And Bitcoin and blockchain, they talk about the ability to exchange value in a trustless environment, right? When AI is going to be interacting with another AI, if there is not a mechanism to commute trust in the source of data that one AI is feeding another, it's going to need to redo the calculations entirely from scratch, come up with the same outcome, and then literally approve it before it can begin its actions, which is why you have to do that credentialing along the way. And I want to just talk about this proof of process, proof of origin, and proof of state of data, Rick. Right? When you're thinking about what's the origin of the data, what is the process of the data getting to this other person relying on it, as Albert was talking about, the other side of the trade, and the other side of the trade may be an AI engine, right, that's ingesting it, right? It may be a trader, it might be real intelligence over there, another market actor. How, when we think about the feeding, the garbage in, garbage out, the feeding of trust and credentialing of that data into this, particularly in private markets, what's that going to do? What's that going to do to the markets?
Well, it'll be transformative because there will be readily available, although permissioned, because these are private assets. So the data is not going to go into a public database like Edgar, but on a permissioned basis for those who are allowed to see it, for your auditor, for your appraiser, for your counterparty in a potential transaction, for the exchange that has listing rules and criteria to do a Reg A listing or to tokenize something, right? On a permissioned basis, we can say, here's the information you asked for. But just saying, here's the information you asked for, trust me because I'm so handsome and trustworthy, isn't enough. What we'll want to say is, here's the information you asked for. By the way, it came from these source documents. Right here, look here in this page, in this highlighted area, that's where it came from. And by the way, that document came when Albert Berdellens, who was identified as the auditor for this asset on this date from this IP address, uploaded this document, and Kevin Cuddeback, who was the deal administrator, approved it as the final version. And the log of events gets hashed and anchored to the blockchain. The files and their contents get timestamped and hashed, and there's proof of that logged to the blockchain. The delivery of that information to the exchange is a transaction which is hashed and logged to the blockchain, so that we have proof of process, proof of state at each step, and provenance of the information back to the human beings who signed off on it and whence it came. And it makes it information that's trustworthy enough to trade on. And that's the whole trick, because these assets are so terribly illiquid that they are discounted awfully, that they're poorly treated on balance sheets, that they're not leverageable or insurable or borrowable against the way public assets are. And we can move towards that. We can get to where good information about the asset makes it tradable, makes it leverageable, makes it a credible participant in all of the financial engineering that's possible.
And Fiacc, I want to throw that out to you, right? I mean, I think that what Rick is talking about is AI with blockchain delivering this information at scale, at speed to markets, so market actors can interact with it. But I think some people are thinking, oh, if I feed data to AI, AI can become an ATM, right? AI is going to just make money for everybody if we just give it good market feeds. Talk to us a little bit about that as you think about that, and kind of what the real value to the market is going to be, and the real value of the markets that it's going to be as AI is deployed at scale.
So I think we're going to remove a huge amount of the friction and costs that we currently have in TradFi, both public and private. I think to Rick's point about having everything verifiable, I think it's hard to underestimate how important that is and just what a groundbreaking change this is going to make, especially with the blockchain side of things. So now you have very often you'll have because every organization is different, right? So you'll have an auditor come in and a regulator come in, and very often they'll have to go through some process where they'll say, okay, show me like your logging and show me your, show me how you do this and show me how you do this. And they go through this kind of ad hoc process where they say, is that fit for purpose? Do I think you have, sufficient backups and all of this kind of thing? And it's up to the organization themselves to implement that in some way. And we kind of hope that all of that is sufficient. What we're now talking about with blockchain is where we kind of have this incredible, immutable, global piece of infrastructure where we can really all be damn sure it's not going down. There's trillions of dollars that it's not going down. And this is like the standardized conduit, the standardized bus upon which you do all of this recording and you use for all this verification, So I think to answer your question, it's going to remove a huge amount of friction and costs for all organizations. It's going to be above and beyond the kind of regulatory safety coverage that we currently enjoy. It's going to bring transparency to a lot of deals out there and bring a lot of liquidity into places that you otherwise didn't, and do wonderful things for price discovery and eliminating some of those horrible discounts that you currently see in private markets. I think the sky's the limits, really. I'm really excited for this area.
Yeah, and what it is it is the financialization of an enormous amount of illiquid assets, right? And there's a comment that was made by Kamori. Thank you for that, Kamori, talking about the ability to be quick and scalable and cheap, and the bulk off-chain data could be stored in a decentralized filing system. I think a decentralized filing system works in either public or semi-public type of solutions. But one of the things that Inveniam uniquely, Tom, if you could put that on the screen, one of the things that Inveniam uniquely does is working with private data that sits out at the edge, right? And I think that's super important. I think Tom has gone for a cup of coffee. That'll come up shortly. Anybody else want to make any comments on the Kamori remark that was that's up in the comment section live? If from our team, if not, I'm gonna go to you, Albert, really to follow up on Fiacc's comments, right, where we're thinking about how, here we go. There was the time lag. Anybody want to make a comment on this before we?
So regulators may want immutable verifications and audit trails. This is something Kimura posted. I just agree entirely. I think it's 100% the case. And especially when we're trying to open up the possibility of trading in private market assets beyond the limited world of qualified institutional buyers who are considered sophisticated enough to decide to trade in instruments that have imperfect information. But the more and more we can show regulators, hey, there's really good information. There's perfected, verifiable, audit trail backed up, immutable, really good information about this stuff. It's safe. Drop the bar. Allow qualified investors to participate. Allow the high yield funds, right, that can only right now invest in sort of public level commercial paper. Maybe they could invest in private credit. Wow, think about bringing all that money into the private credit world and bringing all that yield into the high yield funds. These are huge transformative things. And in my mind, there are two gates. One is getting the information right so that you can make a credible case to the auditors that the changes should be made. And then the second is getting the auditors or the regulators to make those changes. So Kumira, you're right. They're going to want them, and we want them to recognize that they exist and give permission for us to do more because they exist.
And Fiacc, anything you'd like to add to this?
No, I fully agree with all those points. I think all of this stuff is gonna move the standard up, set the bar, and I can't wait for the day when regulators demand that you have this kind of a trail, and they say, no, I'm sorry, look, I'm sure you've done a great job logging things in a database, some custom database that you have in your system there, but I can't be sure that like a malicious actor doesn't come back and retrospectively, because you get in hot water, one of your traders did X, Y, and Z, and someone, I can't be sure that someone doesn't get access to that database and change things retrospectively. If it was timestamped on the blockchain at the time of trade, that I will trust, because I know that you can't manipulate that. If you could manipulate it, you'd be a hell of a lot richer than your business entails, right?
You wouldn't worry about covering up an audit trail.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to become the gold standard for things. I think sooner or later regulators will actually demand that kind of thing. And to your point as well, Rick, of course, just in case people are thinking, that doesn't have to be put up in clear text for anyone to read. Of course,
just zero knowledge proof.
Exactly. Zero knowledge proof. Who needs to have access to it does get access to it.
Yeah, but the actual richer information is stored off chain, but because you've got the proof on chain, you can prove that it hasn't been altered.
Right. And to Kumori's points, that could also be in decentralized file systems as well, which are wonderful for that. So they're highly resilient also.
Yeah. I think, Albert, I want to throw it to you for a comment back and to weigh in on this. But I think probably the greatest subplot of this entire podcast is you watching the people off to your right make noise and make sure they're not intervening into your screen in the airport. But keep going, brother.
I'm glad to provide a small bit of entertainment there.
Yeah,
that's great. I want to piggyback on this, which is a lot of the blockchain maximalists just want more data on chain, and that is really not always the solution to this problem. It put the things on chain that need to be on chain, and the reason why they don't have another solution other than that is just they don't have the infrastructure off chain to do it. And blockchain's been a bit of a gold rush in that way. There's the thoughtful builders, and then there's the raiders and pillagers, and they don't want to wait. And really, it's the same thing on the AI side. The people who are trying to use AI for prediction, they think cardinality. Just give me more data, more compute, and I'll hit some. It'll hit ding, the little bell at the top, and all my problems will be solved. The thing is, you will never know all the factors involved in market decisions, and even if you do, you have no guarantee that those are the relevant ones that will be there tomorrow. There won't be some novel thing that happens. There's going to have to be the combination of computing power, interoperability, general knowledge that AI provides with the controls and data integrity and infrastructure that blockchain provides, and that will end up being the transaction infrastructure that for the future of capital markets.
Fiacc, talk to us about what G42 is doing right now that's interesting, and how's this going to affect the broader blockchain market and crypto markets from where you sit.
We have a number of deals that we're trying to get through at the moment. I won't mention them by name at the moment, but hopefully you'll see some headlines very soon about those. The UAE is really taking a leadership role, I think, in a lot of these cutting edge technologies. You might have seen a lot of the headlines coming out about like huge investments here in AI and in blockchain. And G42, we're doing our part of that. So far, we've been mainly focused on the AI side of things. We have our own Arabic language model released called JACE. That people might be familiar. There's 400 million Arabic speakers in the world, so that's an important contribution that they are represented just as English speakers are with this technology. On the blockchain front, I'm very excited. As you can probably hear from everything I've said, I think it's groundbreaking. I think you unlock when you put both of these technologies. These are two of the most advanced technologies we have, right? LLM-based AI and blockchain. And I think they both have things to contribute to one another. So they both kind of, in advancing us, they also create new problems, and they can solve each other's problems in a lot of ways. So I think they're sibling technologies. They're both born out of, massive parallel compute. And I think it just makes sense that you put these together in different ways, and we're very excited to try and do that, make it happen.
Yeah, what a pleasure having you, Fiacc. We're going to run through and give final comments as we approach the end of this. Rick, anything from you?
I've said enough, but I'm just very excited about being able to ingest more and more and more data without stadiums full of people doing very tedious rekeying work, and allowing AI to help us do that, and being able to trust the data because we stored its provenance on the blockchain.
Yeah, rekeying and reconciliation, right? I think those two, right, because of the time differential, is huge problems being solved. Kevin.
Right, and that, I mean, in particular, I'd like the other big place where private markets function without an exchange is in the general partner, limited partner relationship. And I wish we had had time to go into more about the rekeying and the rework and the, should this cost be allocated to the general partner, or does that get passed on to the LPs? All those little decisions, today result in too much rework, or, but we need to think about that as a slow-moving exchange where capital is called in, it's deployed, and then it's cashed out, and how those transactions can be improved by blockchain and AI. I actually, though, wanted to get one question in with Fiacc on, we know large language models are processing language. Is there anybody out there who's working on what you might call a large spreadsheet model or a large numerical model that can actually work on the math and check math and read spreadsheets and understand, calculations the same way that ChatGPT now understands stories?
Yeah, so I mean, ironically, we kind of already have that. Language was kind of like the last holdout for machine learning. So really, I know it's probably not the answer you want, but we have a very rich tool set, a very mature tool set of mathematical models and AI models that do all of these kind of things. So if you look at like pricing of derivatives and all of these kind of things, like this area is very mature, very competitive. We have, of course, time series prediction tools that are purely based in mathematics, like Arsh and Garsh models and those kind of things. And then we have ones that come into AI, like LSTMs and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, all of that stuff really exists, and it's probably just not as well known by the general public. It hasn't captured the imagination that, say, ChatGPT has, because the average Joe Soap doesn't have a use case to put it to work. I think the real magic happens when you take something like an LLM and you give it access to all of these tools, and you allow the LLM to use a RAG system, to use a Python compiler, to use, everything else, to use some pricing derivative system or whatever. So then it can call upon that kind of mathematical sophistication when it needs to. I will say I did actually read a paper, was it last night? And it was somebody used an LLM to do fundamental valuations using quarterly reports, and the results were actually like surprisingly promising. They seem to claim anyway that it was outperforming human analysts. So yeah, I mean it's an exciting area.
I think that
we're losing Rick at punctually at 11.
Rick,
and I think Albert
thanks
too.
for joining us. Albert, any last comment before we go?
No, I just want to say it's been great to hear, the interesting insights, and it's really exciting to hear all the work that G42 is doing to push this stuff forward.
And I really want to, Fiacc, the final comment that I'm going to make, that as we turn this over to you for a final word, is I just want to go back to long-term capital, right? Long-term capital had traders and they had models, and the models got so good because they weren't seeing either side of the bell curve that they moved the traders off the main floor because they weren't needed anymore, right? To watch for the boundaries. And then, and it worked perfectly until it didn't. You know what I mean? You need the real intelligence informing that. And I think blockchain is a mechanism to feed the data, to verify the data, the source of the data, the process of the data, the state of the data, and then literally delivering that so that the real intelligence can act on it, is when we're going to see real transformation in the markets. Fiacc, any final comments?
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. I mean, I'm so excited about these two technologies, but of course, we have to say nothing is a silver bullet. Nothing's going to solve all your problems. And the more transformative and powerful the technology is, the more you need to have thoughtful consideration about how you apply it. And I think that's as important now more than ever. For my final thought, I want to raise our CEO, Peng Xiao. He's said a number of times in public that he recommends and expects that most organizations will have to have a chief artificial intelligence officer in the very near future. That's how seriously we take this need. And personally, I run my own, being a systematic trading guy, I run my own private investments, and I intend to create a standalone trading strategy where I find financial institutions and long the ones that are making use of AI and short all the ones that are not making use of AI. That's how much I firmly believe this is going to be disruptive. So if anyone's out there listening to this and thinking about it, it might be daunting. I say roll up your sleeves, dive in. It's not going to get any less daunting. Now is the time to investigate and pull the trigger.
Absolutely. Fiacc, what a pleasure having you. Thank you so much. Thanks to all the listeners. It's been great being with all of you. God bless, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.